Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Yep, today, a knife for Michael Myers. So today I'm partnering with Universal Pictures Home Entertainment to show the forging of a tribute knife for the latest episode in the horror franchise that, like its hero Michael Myers, will not die. Those of you who've tracked the series through the years know that Halloween was arguably the original slasher flick in the sense that he did all his killing with a kitchen knife. Now, in the course of the 40 years or whatever it's been that he's been chopping people up, Michael Myers used a lot of different knives, but most of them were commercial kitchen knives like the Victorinox Forstners. So that'll be my mental starting point for this build. But, of course, this one will be a little more souped up than the average knife that you find at Crate and Barrel. This knife will be made from ladder pattern Damascus steel, so I'll begin by making the steel. I've cut two kinds of steel, a nickel alloy called 15N20 and a high carbon steel called 1095. Now this is one of the most complex builds I've ever done. But look, since this video will probably draw a bit more of a general audience than my usual super nerdy and detailed videos, I won't go into the insane amounts of detail here that I usually do. But basically, we're going to stack all these pieces of steel up, tack weld them just enough so they won't fall apart, then stick them into a forge and heat them up so hot that they'll actually weld together into a solid chunk of steel. Even though it's all one big hunk of steel now, those layers will show up in the final product in ways that will reveal themselves as we go. Now that's all stuck together, I'll draw it out and flatten it. Then cool it down and grind all the scale off of it with the surface grinder attachment. Then chop it up again. Restack it, and back into the fire. This will increase the number of layers, just like folding pastry dough. Now for the ladder pattern. I'll stick a die into the press that's designed to squash a sort of wavy pattern into the steel. Like so. Now dink around with it to make it nice and flat. Back to my Ameribraid grinder with the surface grinder attachment. Grinding off all the bumps will turn this featureless piece of steel into a nice, funky, wavy looking thing like this. See it right there? Nope, of course you can't. It's not visible yet. We'll get to that later. I like to drill holes for the handle pins before I do anything else. By measuring to the thousandth of an inch, I can put the same holes into the handle material and be assured that everything will line up perfectly. Let's turn to the handle. Here, I'm using a block of spectacular stabilized California redwood burl. I've chopped it in half, then flattened it. Got to be super flat so it'll mate perfectly with the handle of the blade. Now let's go high tech. I'll be doing the next operation on my Tormach CNC machine. People think CNC is just about pushing a button and walking away and letting the machine do all the work. But believe it or not, this is actually the finickiest and most time-consuming part of this whole project. The idea here is that the handle pins will basically be inlays that will represent the eyes of Michael Myers' mask. So after a whole bunch of ditzing around on my computer, I came up with a design that would fit the handle, hold the handle together, and kind of sort of look like Michael Myers' creepy evil eye holes. So, the idea here is to mill out pockets for the eyes in the handle of the wood, and also mill inlay pieces that correspond and fit into those little pockets. First, the inlays. I'll mill 2 left eyes and 2 right eyes into this strip of mild steel so that we'll have them for both sides of the handle. They're still held in by a thin web of steel, so I'll grind the backs off the inlays and just pop them right out. Then back to the Tormach to mill pockets into the handle material. Done. I'll also mill my logo into the blade steel. I want to do it now while the steel fits comfortably into my vise. Again, like with the handle holes, I have to know exactly where I'm going so I don't stick it in the wrong place. Next, I'll grind the outline of the knife. There, from bar of crummy looking steel to knife shaped object. But a knife's not a knife until it has a cutting edge. So next I'll use a jig to grind in a very precise bevel angle. 2 degrees, no more, no less. I like a jig to establish consistent angles, especially on technically demanding knives like chef's knives. But once everything's set and I start using finer grit belts, I'll grind freehand. As I grind, you'll see this grind line just climbing slowly up towards the spine of the knife. After the blade's been shaped, it's hardened, heating it to 1500 Fahrenheit, then plunging it into oil. Next, tempering. That's softening it slightly in an oven so that the blade isn't brittle. Michael gets really testy when a blade breaks off on some poor guy's spinal vertebra. Now comes the part every knife maker hates, hand sanding. But it's the part that distinguishes a high-quality custom knife from a rough-looking bargain basement knife. Putting in the work necessary to give this knife a smooth, clean, blemish-free surface takes hours and hours. And hours. And hours. But the result is pretty sweet when you finally get there. Okay, so not to get too deep in the weeds of this particular build, but for reasons I won't get into, the handle on this knife has to be perfectly shaped to the blade before attaching the handle to the blade. Normally this isn't the case. You just attach the handle and grind it all to shape. Not here. Perfect first, attach second. In order to make that happen, I pre-assemble everything using this insanely expensive 3M double-sided tape. Then grind away so that the inlays are flush, the handle's smooth and clean, and everything fits perfectly. It'll all be done to a final finish. Once that's accomplished, I tear it all apart, clean off the residue of the tape, and turn to the fun part of this knife. The design I came up with features a flame pattern that will be etched into the knife. This was inspired by the part of the movie where Michael Myers emerges from Jamie Lee Curtis's burning house. To do this flame pattern, I'll steal my wife's red fingernail polish and paint a resist into the steel. Now it's into an etchant, ferric chloride, a fairly dilute acid. The etchant will, at long last, bring out the Damascus pattern in the steel, but if I didn't screw up, it'll also leave the flames unetched. Now, I've never done this before, but because I'm on an extremely tight deadline to get this done on Universal's schedule, I'm in trouble if it doesn't work. And the big reveal where we find out if it worked. Some acetone to remove the nail polish. Man, you may have your own opinion, but that came out even better than I expected. Then I'll assemble the handle and finish off the knife, this time using 2-part epoxy to secure the handle scales, pins, and inlays. I'll actually do it in 2 stages. Scales first, let the epoxy cure, and in the meantime, using a gun bluing product, I'll blacken the eye inlays. I've waited until this point because once those inlays go in, I can't do squat to them. Can't grind them, polish them, nothing. They gotta be right now. So stage 2, epoxy the inlays. Well, if this knife's gonna do Michael Myers any good, it better be sharp. I think Michael would approve. Now I'll box it up and FedEx it to Universal, where they'll reveal it on yet another channel. All right, thanks for watching, and see you soon.